Well, that's one way to stop the audio. Let the app crash. Oh, it's restarting itself.
Skype?
No, the audio app. Well, hello, Jason.
Hi. How are you? Are you streaming?
Yeah, we're streaming, man.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, it seems like this will be an iterative process as we continue to find new ways to make our machines mad at us, or make our machines make us mad at them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The rise of the machines. Anyways, welcome one and all to the Perk and Pub Podcast number 8, and it's called Opportunity Everywhere. I finally got that now. For anybody who's listening to this and somehow wasn't with us when we're live, good, because this is our third time's a charm. We had come up and somehow crashed 2 times before, but third time's a charm, and I'm feeling good about this one.
Well, hopefully you've got enough optimism for the both of us.
Yeah, definitely. So, and we'll have to revisit our little talk on cavemen and happiness, but still, I get paranoid. You start to freeze on me, but I think
we lost it for a second, and I got frozen video. So
okay. Well, hopefully we can stay.
Kissing.
Okay, well there you go. Yeah, there's that. We'll at least, as long as we have audio, I think we could talk to each other, and everybody else can just close their eyes. So anyway, so this whole idea came to me as I was running this morning, and I don't know at what point when I was running, I was listening to the Jordan Peterson podcast. It was the first of his podcasts, which I guess was 4 or something like that. He's talking about religion and myth, and it's crazy, like 2.5 hours of just lots of stuff. It's just insane. But the idea that there is a paralysis that happens when we have too much opportunity in front of us. Now, there's this balance, if you will, of having just enough opportunity and not enough opportunity, right?
Yeah. Sorry, just so you know, I went ahead and shot my video to see if the video would come through smoother, and it is. So. Okay, sounds good. So anyways, so we have there's this balance between having not enough opportunity and too much opportunity. When we have not enough opportunity, there's stress there, because it's like we're feel trapped, like we're in a jail of only that which exists in front of us is what there is. And even if we have imaginations and all this other stuff, we still don't have the opportunity, right? Like I don't know what's a good example, but let's say a person that's on a raft, and that's a sunken ship, right? The castaway. There's very little opportunity, say for that castaway guy on that raft or on that deserted island, for him to start a television network, right? There's just no television, there's no cameras and stuff like that, so there's limited opportunity. Yet when it comes to, you can also have on the other end where you have almost too much opportunity, where it can be confusing and you want to do everything and you just can't do it. So therein lies kind of the conundrum. It's kind of a happy conundrum, I guess, that when there's opportunity everywhere, sometimes it's hard to focus at one point. Too much opportunity almost, yeah.
Yeah, too much opportunity that it's and we have it within ourselves to pare down the opportunity, if you will. Mm-hmm. But do we do that? I mean, because what happens is that we have that FOLO, right? That fear of losing out. Mm-hmm. So if we do have a lot of opportunity, then we are, and we're not we're not capitalizing on it. What does that do to us? What does that say about us? Are we lazy? And are we streaming online, by the way?
I stopped the stream.
Oh, okay.
Seemed like our network was really suffering with it. So.
Okay. So are we just talking now?
No, we're recording.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. So we'll just record it and then post it up later.
Not if they're watching it. At that point, it's already posted.
Oh, okay. So, but we're just recording for possibly later posting, right?
Yeah, we're recording right now, and then we'll upload the video. But at that point, when they're watching this conversation, it will already have been uploaded. So it's like a Spaceballs moment. What's happening now is happening now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Then I guess we'll figure out what exactly is happening after it's happened. And then we'll just basically like go back in time if we can. Which brings me to this crazy conspiracy theory. I guess you can call it conspiracy theory. Have you heard of John Titor?
No, I don't know that name.
Okay, Titor, John Titor. If you want to look it up real quick, go ahead. It's an interesting, and I haven't been looking at much conspiracy theories or whatnot, but it's this weird theory of this guy who's a time traveler named John Titor. Now, I won't get too deep into that, but for anybody who wants to waste a good hour of their day, by all means, check it out, because it's very it talks about Tesla and Trump and Barron Trump and all sorts of weird things and time travel. So it's kind of a fun. It's actually strange in that it is more entertaining to go down the rabbit trail of a time traveling conspiracy theory type thing than it is to actually watch a movie about time travel. That's where we're at this day and age.
Huh.
And therein lies kind of the whole thing. It goes back to it where we'll talk about YouTube, right? Because that's where we're getting all this information at. That's where we're, or at least that's where I'm watching these things. That's where people are watching things. YouTube is just vastly huge, right? And it's getting bigger exponentially almost every day. And so using YouTube as as kind of an analogy, if you will, YouTube could represent the information that we have out there and the opportunities that we have out there. Let's say you wanted to watch every YouTube video. At some point, like when it started, you could, because there was like a video, and then the next day you're like, oh, let's watch all 4 videos, and the next day it's like, well, watch 8 videos. But then by the time you get to where we're at now, there's millions and millions of videos. So it's just impossible, right? It's impossible. It's almost impossible to watch all the videos that you subscribe to, right? If you subscribe to, say, 4 channels, you're still trying to watch them. I mean, it's insane. So you have all this, and opportunity, therein lies a weird thing, that opportunity, when I say opportunity, when people hear opportunity, a lot of times they think in terms of just a career, right? Or a business opportunity. But there's also opportunity in anything we do, right? There's opportunity in food, the different types of food you can try. There's opportunity in the different types of entertainment that you can consume, for lack of a better term. There's opportunity for people who are single, for the amount of other single people that they can see, or there's opportunity in the platforms in which they can utilize to meet those single people, right? So it's almost to the point where it is becoming I believe that we're reaching a breaking point where either things are going to have to continue to expanding and then it'll collapse, or that we're going to have to contract. That's the only 2 things, and I'm not trying to be a doomsday or anything like that, but when you think about it, there's only so many TV shows people can watch, and at this point, people are not only watching new TV shows, they're watching old TV shows again, and you're like, it's just insane. This is just, there's an awful lot going on.
Yeah, no, I think about that a lot too. When as we dabble in this podcast space, and it's kind of like, well, what inspired me and I think maybe you even to start doing this was like watching Joe Rogan.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, and then so Joe Rogan's doing his thing, but then you come to find out like everybody that's on Joe Rogan's podcast has their own podcast too.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they have guests that have their own podcasts. And it's like, well, how many people are actually doing podcasts at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, we still have to remember that there's the amount of producers, or rather, I'll start with the amount of consumers. The amount of consumers vastly outnumbers the amount of producers. Even though we look and we say like, well, there's like 1 billion, or like there's 500,000 podcasts. Oh, there you are again.
Yeah.
Hello. There's like 500,000 podcasts, and we say that just seems like a lot. You say, well, there's also billions of people on the earth, right? So there's just, and think of it in terms of the size of any big city. Let's say you have big city X, whatever it is, and it has roughly 3 million people in that big city.
And if a podcast has 30,000 subscribers, let's just say, and it's just locally owned in that city, that's still only 1%? Even that much? 1% of the population, right? Is that correct in terms of math? Help me out here. Let me see.
Yeah.
So if we have, let me just see, 3 million is probably, right, 3 million times 0.01, 1%. Yeah, 30,000. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's just like 1%. So when we look at it from that point of view, it's like, oh, well, I guess that's not really that much. And if you have like 5 podcasts and 30,000 people each in that city, that's still only like 5% of the entire city. So we're really talking, is it saturated? Is it not saturated? I don't know. Is my perception of it saturated? Because I'm like, our perception of, say, the Joe Rogan podcast and the amount of podcasts that his guests have is probably skewed and seems like it's way off and way out there just because we're the ones watching Joe Rogan, right? Your average person doesn't really even know or doesn't even care.
That's a very valid point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the idea of saturation, is the idea of saturation just perceived, or is it, at what point is it actual and what point is it just perceived? And is anybody who perceives it a doomsday sayer or whatnot until the actual thing happens, which is kind of odd. It's a weird place to be. Because in any scenario, it's like when I talk to people about Noah, right? Noah and the Ark. Let's just use the story of Noah and the Ark. Because people are like, oh, Epic of Gilgamesh. And you're like, okay, I get it, whatever. But let's just use the story of Noah and the Ark. That for all these years, Noah was, building this ark and whatnot, getting animals, and then telling people, hey, stuff's going to happen. It's not going to be good. They're like, oh, no, it's not. So the day that it starts to actually have a deluge, right? And Noah's like, okay, I'm ready to go. On that day, like the day before, was an old man who had lived his whole life and never seen rain, right? Because rain, this is the first time rain actually fell down. And he lived his whole life. Let's say he lived like 100 years at least. And he told all his family, it hasn't rained for 100 years. My whole life, it never rained for the thousands of years before. And this guy's coming around telling you it's going to rain, right? And then he dies, never seeing rain. To him, everybody who says it's going to rain was completely crazy their entire life. And then he goes to his deathbed thinking, everybody's crazy. I'm completely fine. I'm gone, right? And then the next day it actually happens. So until something actually happens, that crazy person or the so-called crazy person isn't validated. I think somebody has a quote that says, all ideas are crazy until somebody actually does them. And there's a lot of truth to that. But is there also truth in that all of the I keep on using the term like doomsday, whatnot, but are all the people who say that the entertainment community, the entertainment business industry is going to collapse upon itself, are they just kind of crazy people until it actually happens? And then when it happens, it's like, oh, they weren't crazy. So you have this like weird thing that nobody says, well, they're not, they are crazy because it's not collapsed. But once it collapsed, they're not crazy. That doesn't change the person. That just means that the circumstances has changed.
Yeah, that's it's a paradigm. It's a paradigm shift, right?
And not everybody actually sees that shift, and not everybody actually believes that shift, and not everybody is actually affected by that shift. From what I understand, I had family that was like farmers in rural New Mexico during the Great Depression, like in the 30s or something. And from what I can understand, somebody asked them, what was that like during the Great Depression? And they said, what do you mean, what was it like? They go, nothing happened out here. We didn't have anything invested in the stock market. We grew our own food. It's like we traded with other people. We bought other people's stuff locally. So there was that was it. You lived, you ate, you spent time with people, and then you just kind of hung out. And so if they didn't have millions of dollars invested in the stock market, they didn't lose millions of dollars in the stock market. And so it had no effect on them. So their whole perception of what the Great Depression was nothing. It just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so for anybody who maybe doesn't even watch television or whatnot, or Netflix, they don't notice how many new shows are popping up because it's just not there. So is it a paradigm as much as it's just a perceived paradigm for those who are closely, or rather just too close to it to see anything else otherwise? We had talked about Jordan Peterson, like the fact that some of the things that you've been listening to are striking a chord in your life. And the reason, and we kind of talked about how maybe the reason being is because you're on a certain path where you're going to meet that mindset, that thought that he's putting out into the world. And it's not a random thing. It's just that that's where you're at and that's where he meets you. It's like two lines that are converging at a certain point. Where they converge is not necessarily a randomness. It's just anticipated, and then it's going to happen at some point in time.
Now,
and
does that mean like almost self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, or how do you mean by that? Just kind of intersecting paths.
Yeah, it is something of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and in some sort of a strange way. I guess that'd be an interesting way of putting it. And we're going back to just kind of sticking with opportunity. That we see, the fact that we see opportunity everywhere is a combination of a couple factors, maybe three factors. One factor is that we're opening our eyes to opportunity, right? That has to happen. Two, we have placed ourselves in an environment where opportunity exists. And three, we have some sort of a yardstick as to what opportunity is and what opportunity isn't, meaning that we've been researching or trying things or whatnot. For instance, as we've been trying to do this podcast, we say, well, we are having some technical issues with computer application A and computer application B or whatnot, right? But the only reason why we see that as a problem is because we've been working with it or we're trying to do something with it. Does that make sense? Like we have a yardstick as to this is supposed to do this, and it's not. Therefore, we can gauge it. So we can gauge opportunity or the chance or the opportunity of opportunity, if you will, by the fact that we've actually gone out there and tried to do things before, and they've either worked or haven't worked.
Yeah, your perception of opportunity is kind of filtered through the funnel of your experiences, right?
Yeah. And the fact that those experiences mean that we've seen opportunity before means that we can see opportunity again, or maybe we don't. But for the most part, we're probably going to see it. It's just like maybe in romance, where people who have had romantic relationships tend to have more romantic relationships, right? Rather than a person who has never had a romantic relationship. Each year that goes by, it gets harder and harder for them to have one, and then they end up like spinsters and whatnot. So it's the same way with that opportunity. Once we kind of see it and have it, we start to see more of it, and we start to see more of it. But at what point does that hurt us? At what point? And that's kind of the thing. And because we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about how the fact that we have lots of opportunity can be debilitating in any way. But it's true. It can be, because we can try too many things. We can lose focus and concentration on certain things because we have dispersed or diluted our concentration and focus across too many items, too many interests, which is something that I have a problem with. That's just an admission.
Yeah, I last week I was at a tech conference, and it's funny because the keynote speaker, I think it was a keynote speaker, actually said, like, be picky about, because this was tech, it was, technology and agriculture, right? Which is almost like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But what she said was like, be careful about what you choose to work on, because you're going to find, I mean, I think she actually said those words, you're going to find opportunities everywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think maybe this was one of our failed start attempts, but you were talking about like the salesman. If you're a tie salesman, don't show more than 3 ties.
Mm-hmm.
There's that issue of now you have too many choices, and making a selection is that much more difficult.
Exactly, and we're seeing that in terms of careers that people are having. Like we are, meaning younger folks, and even myself. I had that same problem. Like, what is the right career for me? Like, what should I do with my life? Is a proverbial question that everybody's asking. Mm-hmm. Because it's open to anything at this point, right? Yeah. When we were agrarian, it's like, well, I can be a farmer, or I can be a not farmer. And not farmer included maybe, you worked at accounting and finance at the bank, or you owned a grocery store, or something, right? Or you sold tractors. But even before tractors, it was even worse. Like maybe you'd make clothes, or maybe in a crazy way you would actually make a living doing a combination of almost all things, because you would make your clothes and you'd have a little farm, and you'd know how to, cook and maybe build a wagon. Kind of think about Little House on the Prairie, even though that's not an accurate representation of what it was like in the pioneer late 1800s. I like to think it is, because I think that show was fun, at least the first, 6 seasons or something. But at the same time, Michael Landon's character, I can't remember his name, Ingalls, right? What was his first name? Something Ingalls. And he basically is kind of like this jack of all trades. He could do anything. But when you say he could do anything within the confines of 1865 technology, which was having a farm and having a wagon, some carpentry, maybe building it, making an axe, or possibly painting a picture or something like that.
Yeah.
So this the amount of opportunity can be debilitating, and again, that does come across as being like, how dare you say that? How dare you say that opportunity is a bad thing when you have everything at your beck and call, when you're so blessed to have everything in front of you, and you say yes, but that's not necessarily a good thing. There is something to be said for a certain level of whether it's designed restrictions or something like that, mm-hmm. or confinements, where you say we will only do these things. It's kind of like the Amish, where they say anything after 1860 technology we're just not going to do. Like up to that point we had everything we needed, and some people will say like, what? That's crazy. They didn't have the internet. But then at the same time, the Amish have not died off. they just haven't. And so because they haven't died off, they've kind of found, hey, you know what? This is great. Like we got up to the point. I think what they did is basically, if I was like in the very first, Joseph, I think, was it Joseph Ammon was a guy who founded, if you will, or started the Amish people. I can't remember. But if I was, let's say he was a smart guy, because he probably was. And if I'm thinking about it, I'm looking at what's going to happen in the future and the way technology is coming along and the Industrial Revolution or whatnot. And you say, for me, it's like, well, let's find a cutoff date. And I say, okay, I'll choose date like 1870, whatever. And they say, okay, that's great. Why'd you choose that date? And if it's me, I'm like, oh, well, because that's about like 3 years after indoor plumbing. Because that's all I really need is like indoor plumbing. After indoor plumbing, every other technology is just basically superfluous. Because nobody wakes up in the middle of the night you don't have to go check Facebook, right? But there are times when you absolutely have to use the bathroom, and going outside to use the bathroom was horrible. And so you would just, if you had indoor plumbing, you're like, that's it, we're done. Like anything after this, we don't really need. It's just a want. Would you agree?
Well, that's a pretty dramatic statement there. I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made for whether the social medias and not even really whether, but in which ways has the advancements in technology have actually done damage to who we are as a society and who we are as, fundamental individuals, So I definitely feel that there's an argument there as to whether or not you don't need any of the technological advancement that came after indoor plumbing. Shoot, man. Comfortable beds are pretty awesome. And
yes, but that's the thing but that's not necessarily a technology as it is a refinement of an existing technology, as a refinement of an existing skill, right? They had tapestries, they had, goose down, they had all these things that they could use. They didn't have a microwave, right? They didn't have any of these other things, but you have all the resources. So it's kind of like Legos. Like you have all the Legos. If you had enough Legos and you weren't worried about scale, you could basically make any Lego toy, right? Because you could make these little tiny little toys, if you will. For the most part, I don't play with Legos much, but you can make the tiny like people or the tiny like structures that they make now, the fancy ones. But if you had enough of them, you could make them on a larger scale, right? Because you have the building blocks of the resources. You don't necessarily need the new package. You just need the new package because you need to make it at that scale. Maybe that's not a good example, but it's just going back to the resources.
Yeah.
And again, I'd love to do some more research on that, but I think that my whole point is maybe it's not 1850. There's this woman who lives in like 1939 or something, or 1935, and everything she has in her apartment is 1935 or before.
Wow.
And that was her choice. Like she's like, this is where I stop. And it's interesting to see these people because they're not unhappy. They're actually very happy. And they look at the outside world and they're not missing out on anything. And maybe they are, maybe to us they are, but I know myself, there's so many different advancements in technology that I think are great, that are fun. We're using one right now, right?
Yeah.
However, does that make me intrinsically happier? Like just at the core of my being, does it make me happier? Or does it make me more pleased at any point in time? Like I'm pleased while I'm using it, and then after the fact, I don't have a sustained happiness. I just have a dollop of happiness, a dollop of pleasure, and then it's gone.
Well, and I was actually just thinking about this last night. So, this is a funny thought. You ever try and remember what it was like to be bored? Like literally bored? Do you remember that? And like we can be at a point where like we're just not enthused, but literally being bored is just not really something that we're faced with anymore, right?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, that's a great point. And I say yes and no because yes, I think for people our age, it's almost impossible for us to be bored, because if you at some point, you're like, oh, I don't have anything to do. It's like, no, you do have something to do. It's like you haven't watched the entire series of Breaking Bad or something, right?
Yeah.
It's there. It's you do have something to do. There's always 800 more Joe Rogan podcasts to listen to.
That's what I do if I'm out there, if I'm doing yard work or housework. Even if I can't watch it, usually I have, my phone in my pocket and I'm streaming Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or, whatever it is that I'm interested in watching. And often it's coming off of YouTube anymore. And I just have it, even if I can't watch it, I've got it in my pocket. And that just makes doing the chore that I'm doing that much easier to accomplish. And actually, I find I spend more time doing the chores so that I can, finish these long podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that aspect of it. You know, like uh, I do that when I'm sometimes cleaning the house.
Hmm.
I'll find things to clean because it's like I
Yeah.
want to listen to another half hour of this, and
Right.
so um, this corner needs cleaning.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yes, you're right that we're not bored because we have access to all these things. However, that's for our generation.
Yeah.
I would say that the younger generation gets bored even easier now
That
because they
actually, that's
have so much.
exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. What made me think about this was my son telling me that he was bored. I'm
Hmm.
like, what do you mean you're bored? You're actually currently watching, I think he was watching YouTube and playing Minecraft or something like that. Like, what do you mean you're bored?
Yeah,
You've you've got like overload of stimulation and you're bored. Holy cow, man. You're in for a rough time
yeah,
if that's really what it is.
yeah. It's crazy. A couple thoughts on that. I have one of the things that I had in my zine that I would write a long time ago. If the just these little sayings from this anonymous uncle, and one of them says like, "Oh, these kids nowadays they keep on saying they're bored." It says they should. I wish they would see what life was like when I was a kid, so they can have an appreciation of what real boredom is.
That's funny.
But yeah, but the second aspect of it is that it's this thing I've been thinking about. We were talking about like I can't remember the guy's name, Maslow or Maslow, I think it is.
Maslow, yeah.
His hierarchy of needs or whatever, and at the bottom they have basic survival, and at the top they have self-actualization.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's been consuming my mind recently, is that because we ask these questions, how could somebody be bored when they have Minecraft, which is larger than anything, and also YouTube, which is larger than anything, and it's this infinite, basically infinite, for all intents and purposes, meaning that we couldn't consume it in our lifetime. So it's infinite to our lifespan. How could they be bored? And and I believe that it's part of that pyramid, and that if we slide in, if we're climbing that pyramid and we don't climb it from the base, and we slide in somewhere in the middle towards the top, we believe that everything beneath us is a right. So survival is a right, you know,
Hmm.
if we've never had to actually have survival, right? And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so
Take it for
so if
granted.
exactly, if we've never not had the internet, then the internet is a right.
Hmm.
That is something that I have because I was born with it. It's here, and if it's not there, it's like you're taking away my rights. But they're not rights. They're actually anything above not dying is a luxury in that pyramid.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of how that thing works, right? If you have life, you have the breath of life, then everything above that is basically a blessing, for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
It's something that it's not a right. It's the only thing we don't really have any rights to anything per se. Now we have some manufactured rights, like in this country,
Hmm.
and that's great, and I love them. But yet, no one person really has any rights other than just life, basically, right? In a
Hmm.
weird way. And if you take just a human, if you take two humans and you put them in on planet Zebor, whatever that is, they don't have any rights other than just the fact that they shouldn't kill each other. Everything above and beyond that is having to gather. They have to figure out. There's nobody who's going to give them any food. They have to find food for themselves.
Hmm.
They have to find water. It's not supplied by anybody. It may be supplied by the earth, but they still have to find it, gather it, and whatnot. So
Hmm.
the only right those two people have is just to to not be killed by the other person.
So what if one of those people imprisons the other and prevents him from, takes away his liberties, right?
Hmm.
Maybe he keeps him alive, but has he not infringed on his rights?
Well, again, if there's two people in this planet Zbor, what sort of structure do you have for who can imprison another person, right? What sort of laws do you have against that? What sort of laws do you have for that? There are no laws, so there are no necessary rights. There is no establishment for that. They would have to get together to say, we have a right to walk freely among other people, but each person has when you get into that, and this is not advocating that scenario, and you're my friend, Vinny, and if I find you on planet Zbor, I hope you would never do that to me. But let's just say that two people are and they're enemies of each other. That doesn't happen. A person doesn't imprison another person just by like random nothingness, right? There has to be some sort of a struggle. So the person who gets imprisoned has a right to struggle against being imprisoned, but they're still struggling for their life. It comes down to, if you take away a person's freedom, in essence, you're taking away their life, because you're taking away their ability to sustain their own life with, food or whatnot. Once you do that, and if you imprison them and you start giving them food, well, now that you're becoming that provider of that other person, and you start to see some sort of a weird hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
So
it's a really kind of weird analogy, actually.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. But it comes down to the fact that we believe that we have certain rights as humans. And do we have those rights as humans? And I'm not saying that I want to take away humans' rights, but the fact that if I live in a house, right, and I don't pay my water bill, they come out and they turn the water off, and then they put a little pin in my water thing, right? And if I want to get water, I'm going to have to go buy it from another source. Where do I find clean, potable water that I can drink without having to pay for it in a city like a metropolitan area? I could go to various places like Walmart and drink from water fountains. I could get reusable water bottles and try to go to the bathrooms and fill them up that way. But I still don't have a right to that water. No, because nobody's giving me that water for free. I'm paying for it, or I'm still collecting it. So therein lies that whole thing. Water, where we think it's a right, if we took a step back and we look at it, it's not actually a right. Because if we're not paying for it, we ain't got it. That's just it.
Yeah.
So slipping in, like I said, slipping in midway up this pyramid, and I'm going to take a look see what that pyramid looks like, because I might be talking out of my butt. But hierarchy of needs. So let's see. There's going to be. I'm going to pull up a picture because that's always easier. Okay, you have at the bottom physiological needs: food, water, warmth, rest. Safety needs up above that, and these bottom two are called the basic needs: security, safety. Above that, psychological needs in these two ascending levels. The third level from the lowest is belongingness and love needs, intimate relationships, friends. Above that is esteem needs, prestige, and feeling of accomplishment. And then, of course, at the top is a self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities, right? So if we slide in at the third level from the bottom, which is belongingness and love needs, intimate relationships, and friends, meaning that we have safety and security that's met for us, and we also have below that food, water, warmth, and rest, then we feel that those things below us are rights, and the only things that we have to work for are the relationships, and then moving up to prestige, and then self-actualization. And therein lies the boredom, because it's really hard to be bored. Trust me. And I know you know this. It's really hard to be bored when you are super thirsty and you need to find water and you can't find it. Right? If you've ever been in that situation, there is no boredom. It's just not, because you're just consumed with the thought of, I need to find water. I have to find water. Or even worse, think about like when you have to use the bathroom, not to get crude or anything.
No, that's true. Real. That's true, man. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can't be bored when you really have to use the bathroom and there's no bathroom around. You're like, oh, I'm not bored. I was like, I gotta find. You're looking around. Everything is a potential bathroom.
Yeah.
Like anything, you start to think, that potted plant, maybe, because this is really bad. I need to find something. And so there is no boredom in basic survival. There may be boredom once you have that survival. Like, let's say you've found a animal, you've eaten it, and you've had water to drink, and you're a caveman, and you're just kind of sitting there staring at the fire. Maybe therein lies some boredom, but they can always move up along the pyramid. Even a caveman or person that's like a Homo sapien who has the same brain capacity as we do, even if they don't have the technology and they've got that lower level set, they'll automatically start moving up and up and up and up. And there's no boredom as they continue to move up and up and up. Take away anything from below, anything down, and therein lies the boredom.
So, let's see. You said take anything below what? Anything below?
Whichever level. Like, so think of the Hunger Games, right?
Okay.
The Hunger Games, you had this, the Capitol. And everybody in the Capitol basically had, on his hierarchy of needs, they had prestige and feeling of accomplishment already, right? And everything below it, which was intimate relationships, friends, safety, security, food, water, warmth, rest. So all they're looking for is self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities.
Okay.
And in that example, maybe it's not the best example, but in that example, all they worry about is the whole bread and circus kind of Rome thing, right? What to eat and how to entertain myself. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't good to eat and if it wasn't entertaining, it's like, how boring this is. This bores me, right?
It sounds like my kid, man.
You no longer amuse me, Minecraft. Please go be something else, And so anything, like I said, anything below that doesn't have, there's no struggle involved.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan talks about this too, that there's that beauty in the struggle.
Yeah.
And that when you're struggling with something, you're just not bored. You just can't be bored because you have a struggle. The struggle is consuming. The struggle is what's taking up your mind, taking up your effort, and really helping you move forward. Remember when we went camping and and it just got cold on us. It was just like everything was fine, and then it's like, it's just going to be 0. I mean, it got down to about like 20 degrees or something that night.
Yeah, it's like survival cold. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were sitting there. We got there, and it was in the afternoon, and we're like, okay.
Hey, there's snow on the ground. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and there's sun in the sky, and so it's not dark yet. Yet it's already cold and windy. And our first thing was like, let's get this fire going. Yeah. Let's get the tents up, because the last thing we want to do is be sleeping out in the cold, or we could sleep in the truck, but we can't get the fire. So let's get the fire going and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
I remember myself, I was not bored while trying to get this fire going and get everything ready. I mean,
very purposeful in that moment. I do recall that.
Yeah. Every single thing you did, every single thing we did had to have a purpose, or else it was a waste of that moment. Huh. And therein lies that beauty of not being bored.
Yeah. And something else I heard Peterson talking about in his Bible lecture series. He was making an analogy to what's the Greek mythological character, the guy that was pushing the boulder up the hill?
Oh, Sisyphus.
Yeah, maybe
something
so.
Like that.
Yeah. So he's, and Peterson suggested that, maybe just the fact that you're pushing the boulder up the hill, and that's your, that's your purpose. And every time it, rolls back down and you push it back up, maybe you're going to make it a little higher because you're a little stronger and you learned something about the path, and maybe just the fact that you have that and that is your thing. Maybe that's good enough, and you should just worry about continuing to push that boulder instead of wondering about what else you should be doing instead of pushing the boulder. Mm-hmm. That's something that I've been finding myself struggling with, quite a bit lately. Just this notion of, is this, to put it in terms of, the title of this conversation, opportunity, is this opportunity or is this dead wood? Am I carrying around dead wood and eventually I'm going to catch a spark and I'm just going to be completely set on fire because I'm carrying around all this dead wood? Or is this actually something that I should be carrying around because this is, truly a part of, I guess, what I need for my existence? I don't know. It's where do you make that distinction? How do you make that distinction?
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction to make, and I don't have the answer because I feel like I carry around a lot of dead wood myself. Going back to the idea of the like pushing that boulder up and everything else is not important. It's funny, two things. I was watching a video about Conor McGregor and the law of attraction, and he was saying in this one interview, he says, I don't watch movies anymore. I don't watch TV anymore. He says, I watch videos of my opponents. I watch videos of training. I watch videos of all this stuff. And then I go out and I train. And I go out and I do everything that's in line with what he is doing, right? The UFC and whatnot. And the boxing, I guess, coming up now.
Boxing, yeah.
Yeah. And so he is focusing on the boulder and not focusing on anything else. It's just the boulder and how to get the boulder further up. It's just, like laser focus. And therein lies, maybe an example for us. However, the second thing is, which one of these do I choose? Because it's a whole business advice of make sure your ladder's up the right building before climbing to the top, because you don't want to climb to the top and say, oh, my ladder's up against the wrong building. And I think I've done that like multiple times in my life, gone all the way through to finish up a project and to realize that it was a big giant waste of time. And people say, no, you learned something in the process. You say, yeah, sure, but at the same time, I did waste an awful lot of time creating something that nobody wanted. And that's it's not just humbling. Humbling is a great word to use when I like to say that my ego took a hit.
Yeah.
Because that's all it is. Is like I wish I could say I'm a humble person, but no, it's my ego. I had great ideas. I thought people would love this thing, and no, they didn't. And there you go. So what thing do we choose? I've had this idea running around in my head of something called like focus prison, where a person goes. It's a prison facility. It's like an actual prison facility that people voluntarily go to, but they have to go to complete some task, maybe something that they want. Like, let's say they want to write a novel, and you say, okay, you're going to go to a focus prison for 3 months, and the only way to get out of focus prison is for you to write that novel, and you have to finish it. But you get to work on it 100% of the time, and you be basically treated like a prisoner. And they're like, well, that's not really inspirational. You say, well, it's actually more inspirational than, think of the amount of books that people in prison wrote, they use that time to really focus on something in thought, and they do it. Now, of course, at the very end, the downside is that if it's such a great place to be and they're working really hard, they're not going to want to leave. So, but at the same time, you have to kick them out. But it's just this idea that of voluntarily placing ourselves in an environment where we have to focus on something, where we strip ourselves of all these other external stimuli so that we can focus on the one thing that we believe we need to do.
Well, and you want to talk about your ego. If you find yourself in that type of a situation and you're still not doing the thing that you want to do, well, there's a whole different, set of psychic weight to take on with that. It's like, okay, well, I thought this is what I wanted, and now I have all this opportunity to do it, and I'm still not actually, doing what I thought I would be doing. It's like, oh shoot, now what do you do with that? And I don't know. I think that does kind of go back to, I think, bringing in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and deconstructing it like you did, and even inserting that notion of boredom, I think there's actually something really usable there. Because I can't tell you how many times where it's like, I really want to do this side project, and when it comes down to it, it's like I had free time, and instead I did something that was not work, or something that was not productive, or something that I guess maybe leads to boredom, or was boredom itself. I don't know.
Yeah. And the irony of this whole thing, of this whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that we're finding people who are actually willingly placing themselves at the bottom, even though they have access to everything else, right? Like there's this guy that has this YouTube channel that's called like Native Earth or something like that. And you may have seen his videos. He makes like wood huts, and he makes all these. It's like native technology or whatnot. So he'll make like a wood hut, or he'll make a wood burning stove out of clay and wood and all these crazy things.
Yeah.
And he's just in like shorts. That's it, just a pair of shorts, and so and also some of these people who are like off the grid people who are out there, and they're digging their own wells, and they're raising their own chickens and doing all this stuff. It's strange to be thrust to the top of that pyramid and then want to go back down to the very bottom, because therein lies some sense of self-worth that really wasn't found towards the top, if the bottom wasn't achieved to get to the top.
Yeah.
And is that a psychological thing? Is that a societal thing? Is it a bit of both? Because not 100% of the people do it, right? There's only certain small percentages of people who do that, but at the same time, it's being done. I think, though, at the level of the younger folk at this day and age, I think somebody was telling me, maybe you were telling me, that this generation coming up, they're calling them, well, I think you were telling me, like they were calling them the such and such generation, like the iPhone generation or something, because they always grew up with a phone, like a cell phone. Like they never not had that type of technology, right? Because it was before they were born.
Yeah.
It came out. And so all they knew is Google. All they knew is the internet. All they knew, or like the iGeneration or whatnot. And so the fact of like finding clean water is just foreign to them, and it's not their fault. And it's not like it's a fault per se. It's just a society thing. It's just a point in time. But
let me. So this is kind of along those lines. Yesterday, after I had some stuff go down, with my, like I told you, I had a contract that fell through, and it's like all of a sudden this foundation that I thought was solid, was completely shaken, and it was like I was on a mountain and there was a landslide, right? So I came home and I started talking with my wife about it, and we had a discussion about what was going on, and we had just had a real bad hailstorm, and our backyard was just destroyed by the hailstorm. We have our willow tree was, branches literally all over the yard. And, after we had kind of discussed what was going on, we both just sort of gravitated towards, going outside and just working, just cleaning up the yard. Right. And it's like, there was sort of a therapy to it, where all this other stuff that, just seemed so complicated to take on, it's like just drifted away, and we just got to deal with something that was simple as cleaning up the yard, And I don't know, that kind of made me think about, Peterson's call to people to clean up their room instead of going out there and trying to change the way people think about the world.
Yeah, instead of protesting.
Yeah, exactly. So something about that's just shedding some of the complexity and just dealing with something that's more your size,
Yeah, and also that has a finish that's within sight, right? A finish line. If you say, we've got all these leaves, all these branches that are out here on the ground, and you say, okay, we know we have a starting point because its starting point is 1,000 branches on the ground.
Yeah.
Ending point is 0 branches, like on the ground.
We'll call it 20.
Yeah, we'll call it 20. And but that if we start and we continue doing it, we can actually see how much progress we're making. And then once we get to the end, we can have this sense of achievement because, oh, look, this is how much we've worked. We can gauge it because we kind of have an idea of how much it is. And it's not like it's not like you're trying to split the atom or whatnot and trying to gauge that. It's something that's very tangible and real in front of you, and it says, well, I can do this. I think that therein lies some of the appeal for the agriculture. When I say agriculture, like mini farms and things like that, because people like seeing, oh, I planted some seeds and I'm nurturing them, and I see a seedling and I can see it growing, and oh, look, I have a watermelon now. And there's that feeling of a cycle, a natural cycle, but also that they fit within that natural cycle. And that they did something to impact that natural cycle and control it in a sense, not necessarily control it, but at least harness the power of that nature. But they know if I get this started now, then when harvest time comes, I can probably harvest some food. But that's very different from, say, like writing a novel, in that you write the novel, you start the novel, and you start writing it, and you finished the first draft, or you're halfway through the first draft, and you've been working on it for a month and a half, and which is kind of where I'm at with this graphic novel that I'm working on.
Okay. And
there's no gauge as to when it's really going to be done.
Yeah.
There's no gauge as to if it's going to bear any fruit.
Right.
It's just not there. It's kind of working on speculation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can drive me crazy.
Yeah. And that's back at that, that notion of opportunities and being able to, I guess, I don't know if it's like just convince yourself or if you can be a little bit more sure than that, but knowing like, hey, is this the opportunity is this the boulder that I should push up the damn hill? Is this the hill I should be pushing the boulder up?
Yeah.
There's all these combinations of, if it was just pushing a boulder up a hill, man, that would be so simple. Even if you never actually got there, at least you knew what you're doing. You're pushing a boulder and there's one hill,
Yeah. Yeah. Now there's, and you're right. You're totally right. Like there's so many questions, even if it's just 2 questions, those questions lead to more questions. Like, is this the right hill? Is this the right boulder? Or the third question is, should I be pushing a boulder to begin with? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, but I think the answer to that is the precursor to the questions, which is the old Simon Sinek, right? Start with why, and to say, okay, why would I? What am I actually trying to accomplish? And once we know what we're trying to accomplish, then that helps us understand the means of accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish. That's where I've had some trouble, because if I say I want to accomplish a book of comics, right? That was my goal. I wanted to accomplish a book of comics. And so I did that. But I really lost touch with the why, because I didn't really start with the why. I just started with the what. It was a book of comics, and I did 3 of them without really thinking about the why. The only why I had was because I want to do it. And so I'm taking a step back and saying, okay, let's have a better why. Maybe the why is going to be, for low-hanging fruit, I want to make $1 million, right? and then work my way backwards. And if I, and I'm not saying that that's the goal is just to make money. Don't get me wrong. But if I work backwards, I say what fits within the realm, like a Venn diagram of make $1 million and what I like to do. And then that little thing in the middle is what I would probably do, right? Am I going to make $1 million selling books with my comic strip? Probably not. Very, very unlikely. Probably the worst way to go about it, right? And but if I say, okay, I want to make $1 million, but I want to do it by selling a book. Okay, it fits right in the middle there. What sort of book am I going to write? Well, I don't want to write straight up porn, and I don't want to write a technical manual, right? So that leaves some of these other things open. And I say, okay, maybe I want to write a book on how to, like what does the market need? Well, the market's very into, let's say that there's an application out there called, Photo Fun. And everybody's wanting to use Photo Fun, but it's very, very complex. It's a crazy, crazy application. Say, okay, maybe I'll just learn Photo Fun and all the programming that goes with it and write a book about that and start doing some podcasts or whatnot about Photo Fun. Mm-hmm. It fits in line with what I want to do, and it's going to make me $1 million. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Writing a book for Photo Fun.
Yeah, whatever Photo Fun is. Maybe it's because it might be, let's say, Adobe Animate, right? Maybe that's, or After Effects, right? I can learn After Effects like no one's business, and then just because there's these guys who do that. Maybe that's not it, because there's not a lot of people who want to learn After Effects, but maybe there's a lot of people who want to learn how to make money on Twitter. And I know these books exist already. I'm just using examples. Mm-hmm. Maybe people want to learn how to, not saying I'm going to do this, but this is out there, like pick up chicks, right? There's books and programs on guys how to find a girlfriend or something like that. Mm-hmm. That might not be my thing, but that's the thing that is making people money. So it's finding out the why. Like, obviously a lot of these guys do these certain things to make money. And once I say, okay, if making $1 million is my goal, and I want to do that through selling books, then I've got to really narrow down, and I got to figure out which boulder I'm going to be pushing up the hill. Yeah,
and up which hill.
Yeah, and up which hill. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We just did a book signing in a neighboring town, and it's the second one we've done in that neighboring town to San Antonio, and it's just no turnout. It's just no interest. Yet we do them in San Antonio, and there's people everywhere, and they're all happy about it. So, just not going to go back to that market. That's a wrong hill to push that boulder up. I just saw a video of this guy. His name is Joe 80s, and I'll send you over. I guess that's his name. I'll send you over this link, and because you're gonna like this link. This guy, I found this video. They call him the best salesman ever, and he basically sells like potato peelers on the streets of New York City, and he's a millionaire to where he lives in Park Avenue. I mean, come on.
Wow.
So his boulder is a potato peeler, right? And would I have chosen that? No, but I don't know. But that's what's working for him.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
That's cool. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, check it out when you have a chance. Because the funny thing is, I saw that and I said, here I am learning how to write novels, and I'm learning how to self-publish, and I'm learning how to draw, and I've been learning how to do this and InDesign. And this guy's freaking selling potato peelers. And he's making millions of dollars.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I say, with this issue that came up with my client recently, yesterday, it's like, okay, well, now I've been working for 6 weeks and I'm not going to get paid for any of that work. And all of a sudden, like, finances become way more important. So it's like, okay, well, I know what I got to do in the short term, which is, figure out, like, get some work, right? So it's like, okay, go look at some temp stuff, go get some contract work that's like somebody's already saying that they need it and somebody is saying, hey, you're the guy that can do it, come do this work and we'll get you paid, right? Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, it's like, coming back to that really, it's like at the foot of it's like the boulder literally just, rolled over me, and I happened to walk back down the mountain and reassess the whole situation, right? So it's like, okay, now I have to again look at, is this the way that I can, make the most impact, positive impact in the world? Like, do I try to push up the same path here or up the same mountain and maybe taking some different paths and, and take another stab at, building up the business, where the return potential may be bigger, but definitely steeper and more treacherous mountains, right? Mm-hmm. Versus going and looking at getting employment somewhere where somebody that actually knows something about business is putting together business or has put together a business and says, hey, we need somebody that does what you do and we're going to pay you, a good amount of money. Do you want to do it?
Yeah. I think that there's I actually, if that's a question, if it's not rhetorical, if you're proposing it, one thing that I've thought about is that it's actually, even though it can be a little bit harder, a hybrid can work. Meaning that it can't work necessarily if it's singular, meaning that if you're, let's say you're a reporter and you work for a newspaper, you can't really go out and start your own newspaper while you're working at the newspaper because it's just, conflict of interest.
Right.
But if you want to have a newspaper, maybe it might be good to work at, say, a television station or something like that sells ads and be a salesman for TV ads or whatnot. I don't know. Maybe that sounds a good idea, but something where an aspect of your business, whatever aspect it is of your business that you want to really fine tune, can be learned from an employer, mm-hmm. On their dime. Yeah. And whether it's the sales or just basic business acquisition, or even down to navigating federal regulations or anything like that, and how to do that, and they've already figured it out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my wife had some really profound and I want to say even simple, but in a way that I wasn't actually able to see. She said, well, I feel like you could do really well, as a CEO, as a business owner, as whatever. She's like, but I think you just have too many things going on right now that you're not in a point that you can do a great job with that. It's like,
opportunity everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, opportunity everywhere, and I've got my hands full of it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and let's bring the recording to a close. But we'll continue a talk right after that, because I have just a couple things I was just gonna talk to you about. This very curious sharing curiosities.
Okay.
So we'll do that. For folks who have been listening to us talk, well, thank you. Hope you got something out of it. I think I know I did. And I want to thank Vinny, of course, for manning the technology and whatever we can. He's manning it, but the computer's computing it, and sometimes those two things don't mix well. As we found out in this day and age.
Well, I definitely appreciate the not being crucified for the many errors.
No, well, I appreciate all the help that you give me. I appreciate all the encouragement, support, and everything like that, and I hope I can do that for you as well.
And you have, sir. And
cool. So we'll bring this to a close. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, man. Just for the sake of not introducing a new technical difficulty, we'll forego the outro music this time around.
All right, and so we're out.
We're out. Peace.
Peace.